and one is scene 1 and one is scene 2. And this first view that you're first looking at shows the first sort of critical moment of the battle with Perry leaving the Lawrence and going to the Niagara. And you can see in between the two large ships, you can see Perry standing up in that small rowboat, transferring his battle flag and command to the Niagara. And these prints are actually highly detailed. The two artists that worked on the original drawings for these, Thomas Sully and Francis Kearney, one of them went to Erie, interviewed sailors, officers, sketched the ships, and they were really concerned about making this an extremely accurate depiction of the battle. And so this is the first print that shows the first great moment in the battle. And then we have a second print that shows the other moment. So this one here, which is the second view, shows the moment with the Niagara crossing the T or firing out of both sides on the British ships.
Where's which one's the Niagara?
The Niagara is this one right here.
Okay. Oh, I see.
And then to the far right is the Lawrence, having at this point been abandoned by Perry.
A lot of cannonball holes.
Oh yeah, that was part of the battle strategy, was to reduce the ships so they couldn't function, they couldn't move, and that would make conquering them a little bit simpler. Mm-hmm. And these prints are also especially interesting from the viewpoint that Perry actually wrote a letter of commendation and recommendation to the publishers of these, saying that these are one of the most accurate views of those 2 points in the battle that he has seen. And obviously he proved of them so much that an inventory of his house after his wife's death shows a pair of these images in their own collection. Those are the only images of the battle they actually have.
I think I've seen this before, where the king is making more battleships. I think this must have been
right. This is sort of a satirical print from the American side against the British, trying to show the British in bad light, that they had already lost the Battle of Lake Erie and the battle later of Lake Champlain. And they're thinking about making new ships to try and retake the Great Lakes.
What is this?
This is a really interesting work of art as well as a legal document. This is Perry's commission to the rank of captain, signed by President Madison, and then dating it to the day of the battle. So it's signed by the Secretary of the Navy, William Jones, and then right there where you are right to the right is the signature of James Madison. And this was engraved on a plate and then all hand lettered where the blanks were, and it's printed on vellum. It was a very expensive document, and this was actually sent to Perry.
Okay, what have we got over this way?
On this side, after the battle was over, there was a lot of interest in memorabilia. There was interest in writing music, and so this first piece here on the left is a broadside, and what it is was words to what was at the time a well-known tune, Paul Jones's Victory. So somebody wrote new words to that so people could sing along about America's great victory against the British. And there was a lot of music actually written commemorating the Battle of Lake Erie and Perry himself, all written within just a few months of the battle. And these are actually fairly rare survivors. They were inexpensive. They were pasted to a building. They were given away. They were bought for a couple pennies.
Television, they were like television at the time.
Right.
The only thing you had.
Or like today's Twitter and all the social media,
right.
This was the way they would get the information spread out.
Right.
And it shows what a demand there was for this type of information as well. And then this is actually really interesting. It's a school sheet. These were basically given to the school children, and they would write poems about their favorite hero or the most recent victory. And this was published in December of 1813, so just a couple months after the battle. So the main scene at the top is actually the Battle of Lake Erie, and then down the side you have other American victories over British ships that had happened in the previous year and a half. And then across the center of the bottom is the famous words, "Don't give up the ship." And these are also rare survivors because they really weren't saved. Once the children wrote on them or they were inexpensive.
Surprising they're in color, too.
Yeah, all hand colored. Now, I'm not sure who actually did the hand coloring. Maybe that was part of something that would have been done at school as well. And then the center area where it's blank, that's where you'd write a poem. But a very rare survivor. This clock, it's a long case clock, we would call it the grandfather clock. It doesn't have to do directly with the Battle of Lake Erie, but by this time, Simon Willard, America's celebrated clockmaker, was making a different type of clock. This would have been a special commission with the ship rocking back and forth, more than likely for someone involved with the sea trade. And that was one of the main reasons for the War of 1812, was the British impressment of sailors, as well as capturing American ships, because we were trading with both sides, the French and the English. So whoever owned this probably would have been certainly been aware of the reasons for the battle, or the war in general.
How long do you have to wind it up?
Once a week.
Once a week.
Keeps really good time. For
Oh,
being
good.
200 years old. And then as part of that interest in items commemorating the War of 1812, these two pictures in this case were actually, oddly enough, made in Great Britain and shipped over here with images of our victory on Lake Erie, other lakes, images of our heroes, like this side here shows Perry. And what's really interesting is scholars have researched these, and there is not one known American-made ceramic pitcher. Every single one was made in Great Britain and then shipped here. So they can make them faster and cheaper and ship them over here. And then these canes are really part of that American sort of quest or desire for memorabilia concerning the War of 1812. And so the one in the back with the ivory knob on it, that is actually made with some timbers from the Detroit, the British flagship. And there's small silver plaques on it stating that fact. The cane up front with the gold cap on the end is actually made with wood from the Lawrence, the American flagship. And that cane is really especially interesting because it once belonged to Henry Clay, a congressional leader in Congress. He was known as a war hawk. He was one of the ones that sort of pushed our country into war with Great Britain, but also one of the ones that sued for peace as well. And that was one of his canes. So it's sort of appropriate that he would have had a cane made from wood from the Lawrence.
How much gold is that? Is that nowadays? That's probably worth a lot of money.
The cap is fairly thin, so it's not as heavy as one would think.
Kind of looks heavy, but
right, but it's really not. It's a thin sheathing over a core. And then these are bronze. These two medals here are the front and back of a medal that was given to Perry. His was made in gold. His officers received one that looked like this in silver, and then they passed out smaller versions as well. And these are restrikes made in the 19th century, but you can still see that sort of interest in sort of classical depictions of our battle. All the inscriptions are in Latin.
The gold ones have to be worth a lot. The silver probably, too.
Would be worth a lot of money. Unfortunately, no one knows where Perry's personal one is, the gold one. None of the family members know where it is, and at this point, no one is admitting to owning it. So it may have been melted down at some point in the past, or it might be sitting recognized somewhere else. And this painting here is really sort of a really interesting depiction of the scene 2 days after the battle. This also was painted in 1860, and it shows in the harbor at Put in Bay, the ships in the background. You've got the combined American and British ships. And then from them, you can see this procession of rowboats. And what they're doing is they're burying the officers that were killed during the battle. 3 Americans died and 3 British died. And Perry insisted that it was a common service. So when you look at the boats coming in, you will see that every other boat has red-coated officers in it. Those would be the British. The boats in between would be the Americans. And then the two boats getting close to you have flag-draped coffins, both British and American. And in the leading boat, you have a series of musicians playing funeral music. And then at the foreground, you would have the officers getting ready for the volley that is shot out as part of the funeral ceremony. And as part of this, Perry insisted that the officers were buried British, American, British, American. They were alternated. They were not segregated. And they were buried on Put-in Bay, and then there they remained until 1913 when they were disinterred and reinterred at the Perry's Monument for Peace that's now at Put-in Bay.
What was the artist's name on this?
The artist on this is Louis Bennett Chevalier. He was an American artist that lived from 1823 to 1889, and he painted a couple scenes of the Battle of Lake Erie. This is the only one that's known to exist at this point.
Oh, beautiful.
And it's very rare to see a portrait actually painted right around the time of the War of 1812. And this is Lieutenant Yarnell by Charles Dellon. And he was Perry's flag lieutenant. He remained on the Lawrence when Perry left to go to the Niagara and was in command of the Lawrence. And it's really sort of interesting to see the type of man and to see how he would have actually looked at the time of the battle. Once again, he's got the correct uniform on. He's got the epaulet on the left, which shows that he was a lieutenant.